And they're over on the right, team of MTG Access. We have the Trevathan up top. We have Ben Ragan in the middle seat, Austin Collins in standard. Up against Will Cruse, Todd Anderson, and Phil Smith. We saw them defeat the Storm team yesterday. You see them actually behind. Both those teams on one loss in that 6-way tie for first you mentioned.
Still not a bad spot to be in.
Not at all. Let's start out here. Will Cruse, Underground Sea. Rio's going to take a look at the hand.
And we are really land heavy and really card light. It looks like Will on a mulligan to 5. Hand is
Angler and lands?
Yeah, two Flooded Strand, a Wasteland, and a Gurmag Angler. One thing about mulliganing too here, if that Gurmag Angler is a Deathrite Shaman, you can at least cast it on turn 1, but it's going to be a while before Will has enough cards in graveyard to commit that.
Well, Rio will just make a polluted Delta and then pass back.
Not wise to wasteland that one.
I like that. So he leaves the fetch land up so it can't be wasted. If Rio just has something like a turn 2 Young Pyromancer, I think he could run away with this.
Yeah, he should be pulling pretty far ahead if he can land a threat quickly.
I suppose is one threat better than another here, or just anything?
If it's going to just go unchecked, turn 2 Young Pyromancer is probably the best that you can do. The reason it tends to be on average a little bit weaker than things like Gurmag Angler and True Nemesis is that you can answer it. But if it's not going to be answered and Will has to top deck to answer it, it's going to generate more power over time.
Got a glimpse of affinity there. And it looks like a top deck for Will is going to be a turn 2 Young Pyromancer. So that actually will put pressure on Rio, seeing if he has one of his 4 Lightning Bolts. Or if one of his 4 Dazes would be an answer, but I don't think he wants to Daze here against the kind of hand Will has.
Daze would be fine. You know that Will's just playing more lands, so you cash in a Daze pretty much as soon as you can.
Yeah, you'll still make the play.
You don't love picking up your land. A nice thing that happens here, if Rio has a Lightning Bolt, sometimes you'll wait until your own turn to make a land drop to play around Daze, but he's seen Will's hand.
Yeah, he doesn't have to.
He knows that this Young Pyromancer is the card that Will drew for turn. Gitaxian Probe can make some of those decisions pretty lame.
Same time, Rio's going to crack his fetch land as well. It's Young Pyromancer off the top for Will. Because Rio just saw Cruze's hand, he knows that this Pyromancer was drawn, so he still has perfect information. You see a bit of a smile on his side, saying, all right, I see what you did. And Rio just fetching up Underground Sea, so no Lightning Bolt.
I believe I've spotted at least one Force of Will in Rio's hand, and
might be worth it.
It's not great in the matchup, but once your opponent mulligans, you can blow those.
Yeah, and he dazes. He did float the mana before dazing too. Now, he knows there's not a daze, but that's just good form.
It looks like Rio has 2 Force of Wills, and as I was saying, you want to cash in the daze as soon as possible, and then down the road, he'll be able to pitching force on the Gurmag Angler.
So this time Rio builds up with starting with Volcanic Island and passes back to Cruse. Does have the force. He unfortunately picked up one of those 2 main deck Spell Pierce on the turn. That's a card that is likely dead in the matchup.
Does not do too much, especially if your opponent's just drawing a lot of lands.
And another great top deck for Cruse. He draws top deck's Deathrite Shaman and Wastelands away the Volcanic. And yeah, that'll earn the Force of Will pitching Spell Pierce.
And Rio still has access to that second Force of Will for the Gurmag Angler. You go down cards every time you Force of Will, but Will mulligan twice. Rio's on the draw as well. Don't really have to care as much about the card economy.
Even so, this game's been closer than I thought it would be, Ryan. It seemed, I guess Will off that hand has drawn Pyromancer into Deathrite, but if say one of those draws turns into a land, this game becomes so much easier for Rio.
Yeah, it would be nice. One thing about it, the game is shaping up. There's interaction back and forth on the early turns, but at some point, Will is going to brick, and Rio is just going to pull ahead. It's not a deck that has immense closing speed. You're going to play a lot of turns in the early game where you're posturing, playing back and forth for position, and eventually Rio's going to do exactly this.
Here's Gurmag Angler, and
pull very far ahead.
Now, on Will's side, he has a Gurmag. He's going to be able to Gurmag of his own. He has a fetch land here. That'll be 5th card in graveyard, 3 mana. But you mentioned there's still Force plus blue card in Rio's hand.
Right, and Will needs to have something that he's top deck on this turn to make a game of it against that. Now, if Will could cast Angler and has picked up Daze on this turn, that's something, because Rio, because of that Wasteland, doesn't have any mana available to fight over that.
So Will, Flooded Strand, 5 cards in graveyard, going to go find a 3rd land. That makes 8. 1 extra for Gurmag if he needs. So he can Gurmag through a daze.
Yeah, just leaving the land on tap and exiling the graveyard, probably the play here. In the Grixis Delver mirror, there's not too much that plays your graveyard. Typically, it's exiling cards to Deathrite Shaman or drawing another Gurmag Angler are the two things you think about. Will is so far off of casting a second Gurmag Angler that you want to play around days.
And that's what he's going to do. Delves 5, taps 2. And Rio's going to force pitching another Spell Pierce. Well, the 2 main deck Spell Pierces aren't good, but Rio's done the best with it. They both pitch to force.
Yep.
What's the thing? Blue cards can only be so bad.
Exactly.
They all pitch to force.
They always do something.
And Will has drawn another threat. His last card was Delver of Secrets, now empty-handed.
The deck may be called Grixis Delver, but...
Grixis Angler sounds like a better deck right now.
Right.
Brainstorm from Rio.
Yeah, plenty of cards up in hand. He'll be going down to 3 after resolving this Brainstorm.
And what I like, and I think I mentioned this with Delver, is that I don't even feel that Rio has to find an answer to this Delver.
No, he just has a 4-turn clock here, and even if the Delver transforms, it needs help to be close to fast enough.
Rio will Wasteland away the Volcanic Island. Remember, with their configurations, Will only has 1 other Volcanic in the deck.
And in order to bridge the gap on this race, Will's really looking to draw lightning bolts, and without that Volcanic Island, wouldn't be able to cast them.
And his Delver didn't flip. If it transformed this turn, we would have had a race that was close, but it did not. First match result in on the standard table. Cruse's teammate Phil Smith takes game 1 with mono red. Angler will hit it and send Will down to 8. Rio looking to even the score, and he's gotten ahead. It looks like he'll be up to the task. Can transform that Delver of Secrets off a daze.
It's one of those ones where you almost don't want to reveal.
Yeah.
Because it's so bad.
Yeah. His hand now a fetch land and a daze. 2 more hits from the Angler. Or 1 plus the Lightning Bolt will do it.
Yep. Rio does fetch down to 9, though. Fairly safe to do that, because it would take 2 Lightning Bolts from Will to catch up to this clock.
Yeah, and his mana just doesn't do that.
Yep. Yeah, he may have 2 cards in hand, but he just has 2 black mana available.
We have 1 open seat for our next Dominaria booster draft. If you would like to draft the new set, then we got one. Thank you.
Rio setting up here. Gurmag Angler, mentioning just really powerful in this matchup once it resolves. There's no clean answer, nothing like a, what would I say, terminate. I don't.
Sometimes you see a main deck Diabolic Edict.
Okay.
It's mostly because Merit Lage exists, but
sure.
Angler's not a bad one to hit.
What are the other kinds? The 1 mana kill spells you might see. Like
you
Murderous
dance with
Cut.
the idea of putting Dismember in your deck sometimes.
Okay.
There's matchups where it's particularly bad, but it's pretty good in the mirror.
I suppose that's better than Murderous Cut.
Yeah. Well, also because you just need to have a graveyard for your Gurmag Angler, and sometimes they shaman you off of being able to delve.
Will hit down to 3, draws no answer. So Rio Trevathan takes game 1, evens the score at 1 game apiece for their teams. They're going to go to the sideboard, and we'll check in on that modern match in just a minute. we're back here. Let's look over the sideboards. Players playing nearly the same main deck, but their sideboards actually have some differences. On Will Cruse's side, 3 Cabal Therapy, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Price of Progress, 2 Surgical Extraction, Ancient Grudge, Diabolic Edict, Dismember, and Marsh Casualties. On Rio's side, he has the same Flusterstorms, Pyroblasts, and Surgical Extractions. He has only 2 Cabal Therapies. He has an Abrade, which Will does not. He has the same Grudge, Edict. He has 1 fewer Price of Progress. He has the same Marsh Casualties, but he gets to add Umezawa's Jite and Pithing Needle, which Will doesn't have. So a lot of the same cards and then a couple of the extras.
Sideboarding in here generally not very exciting. You're looking for things that 1-for-1 with the right card. So on Will's side, those 2 Pyroblasts, they fight over True Nemesis, sometimes Ponder. They can kill a Delver. All that stuff plays.
The Pyroblast from both players.
Yep. Diabolic Edict, it can answer True Nemesis, and Gurmag Angler. That one's pretty important.
Marsh Casualties from both players. It answers True Name.
It answers True Name and Young Pyromancer and all of his friends. So that one's great. Dismember also answers Gurmag Angler. And then for Rio, that Jite, that can be extremely impactful. It's hard to convert that in older builds of Delver, but once you have Deathrite Shaman, it becomes a lot easier. 4 mana is just very doable.
Yeah, so they both have the first 4 cards, and we have then the ones that are different. A Dismember on Will's side, and then on Rio he has a Jite and the Abrade, perhaps?
Yeah, it's not terrible to bring in a Abrade. It answers most of the threats. It doesn't answer Angler or do anything about True Nemesis, but so that's true of a lot of your cards.
Well, that's why Dismember might be a bit of an upgrade because specifically it answers Gurmag Angler.
Dismember generally going to be better than Abrade. Sometimes when you're trying to peel a removal spell, say you've already taken a hit from the Angler, maybe a Delver has hit you, Dismember can be kind of awkward. You do have access to black mana in these decks, though. So it has to be a couple things. You have to be a little bit behind and be choked on black mana, and then Dismember can be pretty poor. But on average, it is going to be better.
So, Ryan, what's the reason we're seeing Abrade see play in Legacy? You know, 3 damage for 2 mana is not good enough for the Legacy format when it only hits a creature. But we have been seeing it show up. I believe there's a 4 of in the Mono Red Prison deck. What are the artifacts they're so worried about?
That was kind of amusing to me because the card that it is actually the perfect card against is Mono Red Prison, because it's a 2-mana spell that deals with Chalice of the Void. It also kills all the threats, say Goblin Rabblemaster or Magus of the Moon against a deck like that. Largely, it is just this 2-mana spell that's good against Chalice of the Void decks.
Okay.
If your opponent's playing Stoneforge Mystic, it can either deal with the Mystic itself or blow up the Batterskull Jite, what have you. It's good against decks like Death and Taxes for that same reason.
Okay, so Chalice of the Void is the main artifact that you're trying to destroy with when you register a Braid?
Yeah, and the splash damage against Stoneforge Mystic is very relevant.
All right, all game 1's in the books. Todd Anderson, actually, on the Modern table with humans, takes game 1. That one's a bit of a surprise to me. Though I guess I shouldn't be surprised by Todd Anderson taking wins.
Yeah, it definitely is a winnable game 1, but for Ben Ragan, you do not like being down a game in that matchup.
I mean, with Affinity, I think one of the draws to the deck is your win percentage in game 1s, just in general. I wouldn't be surprised. It's over 70. Good. You know, this Sex game 1 is just fantastic.
Yeah, as long as you don't have to mulligan low, you're typically running away with your game 1s.
All right, we are underway. Both players on 7 here for game 2. Will Cruse starting off with Ponder.
Sigh of relief from Rio as Ponder is not Deathrite Shaman, but it's not the worst way to spend your first turn.
Yeah, we did see with our last game, neither player really getting a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman. Will tried to make one, I think, on turn 3, but then it was met with a removal spell.
Yep.
Or with a Force of Will.
This time looks like both players are on 7, so we should have a more interesting game.
You know, it actually kept pretty interesting. Rio had to Force of Will twice, so he did bring himself down to Will's number of cards, but that was all part of the plan as the Gurmag Angler got to resolve.
Well, Will wasn't only on 5. It was also like a 4-lander, right?
Yeah. I suppose the 4th land just isn't a card in this matchup.
No, not particularly. It can matter, but not when it's 4 of your 5 cards.
And here's the turn 1 Deathrite Shaman from Rio. It dodges by a daze.
Yeah, we'll see if it gets bolted anyway.
The dazes are still in the deck, right?
Typically, yeah, you can go lower on them. It can be difficult to convert, but it's generally better than Spell Pierce, partially because it's one of your answers to True Nemesis. It also can put your opponent off balance if the plan is turn 2 Young Pyromancer without a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman.